Well, it's time for another episode of Build Request where I go completely out of my comfort zone and build once again a realistic military vehicle. I am of course Grim Grindle, and this request comes from Electro, who has asked me to build a Spitfire. And much like practically every other military build I've built, I've based this build almost entirely off of results from a Google image search of Spitfire, so if I've missed any intricate details of intrinsic importance, I do of course apologise. It's not my area of expertise and I'm going in rather blind here. And speaking of details, the focusing on which was the main part of this build. The Spitfire, being a World War II fighter plane, doesn't exactly have many complicated areas of functionality. It's just an aeroplane, a really cool one, but an aeroplane nonetheless. What this means is, rather than having to spend a lot of time trying to cram in functionality and having pieces of the vehicle be able to move, and hiding glitch stuff in it like hyperdrives and spring engines, instead, I could just focus on trying to get the vehicle looking as good as it could possibly look. And I think I did manage to get it looking pretty close in the end. I mean, World War II aficionados can be the judge of that, but as a layman, I think it looks pretty alright. I did, of course, due to the medium of which I'm building in, Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts, have to make quite a few sacrifices on detail, the biggest of which being the tail of the plane, where it's supposed to be a little bit higher, but not an entire 1 block higher, and the wings where 1 block less would be too thin, but 1 block wide is too thick, and it was sort of unavoidable that I would have to choose one or the other in the knowledge that it's still not going to look perfect. And because of these minor unavoidable sacrifices, which, though unavoidable, did make it so that small but noticeable details of the Spitfire were impossible to implement properly into this build, I'm not sure how accurately this build is a build of a Spitfire, but more of a generic World War II era looking plane. But in my defense, as far as generic World War II era looking planes in Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts go, this one's a pretty darn good looking one. And past its looks, to talk briefly about functionality, though simple as it is, it's simply using a large propeller and is powered by several small and medium engines. If it's a propeller plane that I'm replicating, I always avoid using jets in the build because even though it's being piloted by a bear with a bird in its backpack, that's no reason we shouldn't aim for realism. And then finally its paint job, of which I took quite a few liberties, mainly because in the Google image search most of them were an army green, which we don't really have in the Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts colour palette, and everything I tried to go with while trying to look at least a little bit like the proper paint job of the plane turned out looking really terrible, so instead I just went for my standard black and red paint job that I used for the Grizzly and most of my custom vehicles. And so there you have it. A Spitfire, or at least a vehicle that is doing its best to resemble a Spitfire, and maybe should be relabeled inspired by a Spitfire, but the closest thing you're probably going to get to a Spitfire in Banjo-Kazooie nuts and bolts. If you would like a copy of this almost Spitfire in your own save, what's going to follow now is a layer by layer. And as always, thanks for watching, and until next time, I have been and still am Grim Grindle. And if you would like to join the Channel Grim and Grin Discord, the Echo Chamber, a link to that as well as my Twitter is in the description below.
Go.